You think being poor means not having spending money? No real poverty is living somewhere like Kyrgyzstan, the poorest country in Asia. Never heard of it. Don't worry, most of the world hasn't either. But don't scroll past. What's happening here will stop you in your tracks. Incomes are so low, it's hard to believe people live in nature, like it's the Stone Age. And yet somehow they keep going. They smile, they survive. They carry on like nothing's wrong. Number 1. A 7 a day. Economy Kyrgyzstan has one of the lowest per capita incomes in Asia. As of 2024, GDP per capita is around $410. That's less than $7 a day per person. Even with some growth, these numbers don't move the needle for most of the population, especially in remote areas. Nationwide poverty sits at 30%, and over 40% of children live in basic deprivation. That's 4 out of every 10 kids. About 65% of people live in rural areas where agriculture is the main livelihood, small-scale, no machines, and entirely weather-dependent. One failed harvest can send entire villages into debt with no crop insurance or meaningful microcredit support. In this economy, informal labor makes up 70%. That means no contracts, no social insurance, no retirement. If you lose your job or get sick, your family income disappears overnight. One pillar of Kyrgyzstan's economy is remittances, over 30% of GDP. Hundreds of thousands of workers send money back from Russia, Kazakhstan, and nearby countries. When those economies slow down, thousands of Kyrgyz families lose their main source of income. This dependence puts the country at the mercy of external shocks. A dip elsewhere becomes a crisis at home. Stable jobs in Kyrgyzstan are rare. As of early 2024, the national minimum wage is just 1/900th sum, less than $22 per month. Meanwhile, basic food prices have jumped nearly 10% in the past year. A kilo of flour, a staple in rural diets, rose from 33 to nearly 37 samama. Mutton, a traditional dish, now goes for over 500 som per kilo in many highland markets. The gap between cost and income pushes thousands of families to the edge, struggling daily just to eat and stay clothed. In many small villages, cash isn't even the main way to trade. People swap milk for firewood, trade horses for rice. A healthy sheep can be worth a basic smartphone. Here, value isn't measured in currency, but in what gets you through the winter. And when assets can't be converted into healthcare, or school fees, escaping poverty becomes a cycle that traps generations. Government support programs barely scratch the surface. In many regions, lack of documentation means people who've lived there for decades aren't even counted for aid. A 2023 national survey showed that over 40% of respondents believe support never reaches those who actually need it. Yet Kyrgyzstan has resources other countries dream of: the Kumtor gold mine, abundant hydropower, and vast farmland. But when resource distribution is dominated by insider interests and a lack of transparency, growth on paper doesn't lift real people out of poverty. So where's the money going? Who's shaping key policies? The answers aren't in the numbers, they're in how power is arranged and kept. Number 2. The limits of growth without internal drive. Kyrgyzstan posted a 9% GDP growth rate in 2024, a standout number for Central Asia. But the foundation of that growth raises real questions. It's mostly driven by domestic consumption, mineral exports, and re-export trade, all easily shaken by outside forces. By 2025, growth is projected to fall to 6.8%, showing just how fragile things are without strong internal momentum. One reason growth hasn't improved everyday life is the economy's focus on low value-added sectors. Gold is the top export, accounting for nearly 40% of total trade. But mining doesn't create long value chains or many sustainable jobs. Meanwhile, agriculture contributes 20% of GDP, but remains low yield due to lack of mechanization and dependence on nature. Trade makes up over 50% of GDP, but much of it is re-export, importing from China and shipping out to Russia or Kazakhstan. When these countries tighten borders or tweak tax policies, supply chains break instantly, and GDP swings wildly. Kyrgyzstan's reliance on this middleman trade model leaves its economy with little control and weak flexibility. The official unemployment rate is under 8%, but in reality, underemployment and off-field work are widespread. Informal workers earn nearly 40% less than those with contracts. There are no long-term policies to grow small businesses, expand processing industries, or link up markets so capital stays locked in repetitive sectors. This economy shows money moving, but not opportunity growing. Growth is flat and wide, not deep. Not improving living standards or labor productivity. Let's be direct. What's the point of fast growth if inequality keeps getting worse every year? If you were running a small business, would you go for short-term profits or long-term stability? Compare that to Kyrgyzstan's approach to growth. It's the difference between speed and quality. Number 3. A state built on backroom deals. Kyrgyzstan has launched many reforms to build an independent judiciary, but in practice power is still centered on the executive branch. Legal, constitutional, and even judicial decisions aren't made through checks and balances, they come down as orders from above. This creates a shaky legal environment where enforcement depends more on someone's rank and influence than the law itself. One clear sign of this opacity is selective prosecution. Not all wrongdoing is punished equally. Some cases stay invisible thanks to political connections. Others get publicized not for severity, but to send a message, a temporary show of control, not a long-term legal foundation. As a result, public trust is low. In a 2023 survey, only 26% of people said they believed the courts could protect their rights. Among businesses, trust in the agency overseeing public contracts was just 18%, extremely low by regional standards. When public tenders are decided in private talks, business licenses depend on flexibility and civil service. Exams are just for show hopes. For fairness, erode one experience at a time. Only about 12% of administrative complaints from citizens are resolved successfully. Proof of the gap between policy and practice. When laws don't apply equally, but depend on class and connections, society enters a permission mode. No one acts unless they know who's behind each decision. You can measure economic growth in numbers, but fairness? That's only real if people believe they're treated equally. When that belief dies, society won't collapse all at once. It'll quietly check out of change, one person at a time. So in a system where no one's listening, will you still speak up or walk away from it all? Number 4. Between tradition and trauma. In many rural parts of Kyrgyzstan, a type of marriage still happens alongside official ceremonies. The bride is abducted without a proposal or consent. This practice is called ala kachu, meaning grab and run. It was once seen as bold, even efficient. Today, it fuels thousands of pressured marriages. An estimated 13,000 forced marriages happen each year, 20 to 30% of rural marriages. Not all are consensual. Many happen in broad daylight at work on the way home, where women are forced into a car and taken to the man's home. There, the groom's family tries to keep her overnight to seal the marriage. Community response is split. Some say it's an untouchable tradition, but the younger generation increasingly sees the damage. Once taken, women face immense pressure. Going back means being labeled worthless. That shame drives many to stay in marriages they didn't choose. Kyrgyz law does outlaw. This forced marriage can carry up to 10 years in prison, but enforcement is spotty. Most cases aren't reported or are handled quietly within the community. Some get off with a fine or a fast-track mutual agreement, even if there was clear coercion. One driver of the practice is financial traditional weddings can cost up to 800 $, far beyond what rural families earn in months. Bride kidnapping is seen as a shortcut saving money while keeping face if the girl agrees to stay. In the long run, Kyrgyzstan can't build human development if it doesn't end customs that destroy personal choice and future potential. There's no real modernization if many young women still can't even choose whom they marry. There's a big difference between a traditional wedding and a life that's been mapped out for you. In a society like this, what truly matters more? Community honor or personal freedom? Number 5. The living memory of the Kyrgyz. In the spiritual life of the Kyrgyz people, no symbol compares to the Epic of Manas, not just the longest oral epic in the world, nearly 500,000 lines, but one of the deepest cultural foundations. It tells the story of Manas, a hero who united 40 Kyrgyz tribes to defend their land and identity against outside forces. But the real value of Manas isn't in the victories, it's in how it became a shared consciousness, binding the community during eras with no state, no defined borders. For centuries, while political power shifted and maps were redrawn, one thing stayed the same: collective memory passed down by generations of Manaski. These storytellers didn't need scripts or microphones, just a small stage, a strong voice, and thousands of memorized verses down to the last syllable. When politics fails to unite, and economics fails to provide culture, becomes the final anchor. So if your community could only keep one tradition to survive the global wave of assimilation, what would it be? For the Kyrgyz, the answer has been clear for hundreds of years. Number 6. A beauty the world hasn't seen yet. Kyrgyzstan is home to lands that sit 2,750 meters above sea level on average, with over 90% of the country covered in mountains. The Tian Shan Range cuts through the nation, carving deep valleys, ancient glaciers, and cold arid plateaus. This place is called the Switzerland of Central Asia, not for luxury tourism, but for its raw, rugged, untouched beauty. Lake Issyk Kul, over 200 km² in size, is the second largest saline lake in the world with no outlet. It sits over 1,600 meters high and never freezes even though it's surrounded by snow and ice. Once a major stop on the Silk Road, it's now a domestic tourism hotspot, attracting millions of visitors each year, mostly from Central Asia and Russia. Then there's Ala Archa National Park, less than an hour from the capital Bishkek. One of the few places where you can see forests, glaciers, and vertical rock walls all in a single day. Trekking routes like Ala Kul and the Alai Valley take travelers through real nomad camps where herding remains a way of life. Community-based tourism is gaining traction, a model that works well given limited infrastructure. Small villages in Karakol-Narin and Kochkor have set up homestays, giving guests a taste of everyday life, sleeping in yurts, eating horse meat, and riding through alpine grasslands. Still, poor transport, limited healthcare, and lack of international marketing mean tourism potential remains largely untapped. With a dry, cold climate and sparse vegetation, Kyrgyzstan's ecosystem is highly sensitive to climate change. Glaciers, the main water source during dry seasons, are shrinking by 1% annually. Unregulated tourism could unbalance local environments unless clearer plans are put in place. So when a country holds breathtaking natural treasures but barely gets mentioned, who decides if that becomes a national advantage or just another missed chance? Number 7. Sacred memory in stone and water. For the Kyrgyz, the bond with nature isn't just survival, it's a deep cultural foundation. Mountains, valleys, and lakes are often seen as sacred, not in a modern religious sense, but in ancient belief systems where nature holds spirits and supernatural strength. Sulaiman II Mountain in southern Kyrgyzstan has been a pilgrimage site for thousands every year. Though the region is dry, it has rock crevices believed to be gateways between two worlds where people go to pray for health, fertility, or protection. Carvings, flat rock altars, and winding trails are still part of rituals today. Lake Issyk-Kul, besides its natural beauty, is wrapped in folklore. One common legend says a sunken city lies beneath, destroyed by nature's wrath after its people committed grave wrongs. Stories of strange lights on the water and eerie nighttime sounds are passed down through generations. The ancient Tengrist belief system still runs deep, especially in semi-nomadic areas. In this view, people live in a three-way relationship: sky, earth, and ancestors. Healing rituals, protection ceremonies, or harvest blessings are often led by a community-recognized guide, not a priest, but someone respected for their experience. When sacred places have no fences or written rules, what stops people from crossing lines their ancestors once drew in reverence? Number 8. Nomads in the digital age. In many highland areas of Kyrgyzstan, people still live nomadically, not just out of tradition, but because nature makes settling down impossible. Livestock need fresh grass year-round, so families migrate seasonally, pitching yurts and moving again when the pastures dry up. Thousands of families do this every year. In summer, they head to the Jailu highlands for cool air and wide grasslands. Winter forces them back down to avoid brutal winds and deep snow. Even with tech trucks and smartphones, their rhythm is unchanged, relying on people, animals, and nature's cycles. The Kyrgyz have a traditional way to value wealth. 1 sheep equals a basic smartphone. 10 sheep equals 1 cow. 50 sheep, 1 good horse. Families with hundreds of sheep are considered well off. Wealth isn't in bank accounts, it grazes on hillsides herded daily. And here's the paradox: a child might ride a horse at dawn to fetch water, then do homework at night on a phone using 4G. In many areas, yurts are now fitted with solar panels, enough power for lights and charging batteries. If you were born into this lifestyle, would you stay or try to leave? What makes a place truly feel like home? This mobile way of life is flexible, but comes with major limits. Hard to access continuous schooling, hard to reach medical care, hard to plan infrastructure or investment. A country that wants modernization needs settled populations. Yet tens of thousands in Kyrgyzstan still have no fixed address for even a temporary registration. That makes it tough for national policy to reach them, especially in remote and rural zones. Number 9. The reality of Kyrgyz workers' migrant labor is a lifeline in Kyrgyzstan's economy. Over 1 million citizens work abroad, mainly in Russia and Kazakhstan. The money they send home makes up over 30% of the GDP, one of the highest rates globally. But depending on labor exports also means extreme vulnerability to forces beyond control. Any change in immigration rules, border policies, or political tensions in host countries can shut out thousands of Kyrgyz workers, denying them entry jobs or legal status. A few short crackdowns a year can slash remittances, sharply hitting the wallets of millions back home. Legal risks aren't the only issue. Social media and cross-border messaging platforms also pose dangers. Some extremist groups exploit young, disconnected citizens struggling financially, recruiting them online. Their main targets are jobless youth with little social support, easily drawn in by digital networks. When someone has to choose between undocumented labor at low wages or staying home with no income, what does that say about the system they live in? Even as more people leave, most national development policies still focus on the domestic population with no clear strategy for those abroad. Support programs, legal protection, and retraining for returning workers are not yet widely available. To understand Kyrgyzstan isn't just to learn about a little-known country. It's to see the human sides of development, the right to choose the means to survive, and the hope for fairness. None of this information closes the conversation. It opens a new lens where the unfamiliar can reveal truths that hit close to home for any nation. If you think this video deserves to be seen, like to support NVL Travel Documentary. Share it with friends if you believe stories like these need more eyes on them. And if you've got another angle or an interesting fact about Kyrgyzstan, drop it in the comments. We read them all. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next journey where every destination holds a truth that hasn't yet been told. Thanks for watching.